This is the story of Noah's Ark. Long ago, there was a man who lived on the earth named Noah. He had a wife and 3 sons, and they had wives. The earth was a very different place, and people were not kind to each other. God saw this and decided to do something drastic to make a difference. So, God decided to send a flood to cover the land. But God saw Noah and knew that Noah was good. And so God said to Noah, "Noah, I'd like to save you and your family. I want you to build a boat, a big boat. Make it out of wood. It has to have 3 decks, and it needs to be over 450 feet long. And in that boat, I want you and all of your family and 2 of every kind of animal, bird, and reptile on the earth to hide and to shelter from the rain. Take everything you need to stay for a long time." Noah was surprised, but he did this, even though people laughed at him. And when all of the animals were in the ark and everyone was safe, it began to rain. And it rained and it rained and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And everything on the earth was flooded. But Noah and all of the animals and Noah's family were safe in the ark. When it stopped raining, there was nothing left. Everything and everyone was gone. Then the water began to drop down, to recede, to dry up. It took another long time, 150 days, for the water to dry up. But when it did, Noah and the ark and his family and the animals all came to rest on a mountain named Ararat. And Noah sent out a dove, and the dove came back with an olive branch, and they knew it was safe to open the door and go out. And they gave thanks for having been safely brought out of the flood. And God sent a promise to Noah and to all mankind in the form of a rainbow that never again would there be a flood. Would there be a time when God would restart everything? Hi! So, Noah's Ark. It's quite the story, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I first learned about Noah's Ark when I was a little girl. And I had toys that I could play with that were all about Noah's Ark. Toys that had animals that I could put in the boat and a little figure of Noah and his family. It's a really interesting story. It's kind of got some scary parts and some strange parts, and it's got some parts that make us scratch our head. How could Noah, one man, even with his 3 sons helping, build a boat out of wood big enough that all of the animals of the world at that time, 2 of them at least, could go in the boat? 2 animals of each kind, and birds and reptiles. It's a lot of animals. And how about their food and the water? Now, I suppose they could drink rainwater, so they didn't need to take water with them, but they would need food. And I always wondered, how did they keep the animals from trying to eat each other? Snakes eat birds, cats eat birds, lions eat cats. These are things that made me wonder, how did they keep everyone safe on board the ark? How did they keep the lions from eating each other and Noah's family? It was a big undertaking. Do you know that there are some people today that are still looking for where Noah's ark came to rest on Mount Ararat? And yet other people say, oh, it's just a story. It's just a story. So what is it? If you're like me, you've been watching the news and seeing or maybe hearing from your parents around the world about all of the floods that are happening in Europe right now, and floods that have happened in our own country. Right here in Bracebridge in the last 5 to 10 years, we've had lots of floods. Do you think it's because God's mad at us? You know, sometimes long ago, people didn't understand the world the way we do now. Nowadays, if we're looking at why a flood happens, we might look at weather patterns. We would definitely think about global warming and climate change. We would also look at water management and where we needed to open dams or close dams or be more vigilant about making sure that the water flows in the proper way. In ancient times, when things like that happened, they didn't have the scientific understanding that we do now. And so they tried to figure out why natural disasters happen. And lots of times, gods were to blame. In this case, our God of Christianity, of Judaism at the time. And so it was really easy to say, well, this flood happened because God was angry. And we don't necessarily think those things anymore. We don't think that the flooding that happens anywhere is because God is angry. It's just part of the world we live in. So, could this story be real? Could there really have been a big, big flood all that long time ago? Well, science says that there wasn't a global flood based on looking at the earth and patterns in it, but there might have been a flood in the Middle East. There are lots of other myth stories about floods in the world at that point in time, so who knows? Is it real? Don't know. Is it true? Is there something we can learn from this story of Noah? Well, in the first story, God got angry because humans were making wrong choices. God's decision was also a choice to create the flood. At least that's how the story unfolds and what we're told. Now, that was God's choice and there were consequences. And the reason God acted was because we were making choices. Maybe not the best choices, we as human beings. So we can learn from our bad choices. And God did too. God learned that never again would God do that. That was such a terrible thing. It shouldn't ever happen again. And so God made the rainbow promise. Put the rainbow in the sky that never again would that ever happen. So God learned, and we can too. We can look at some of the things we've done and say, okay, how can I behave in a better way and make a better choice next time so that this consequence doesn't happen again? We can make better choices. We can also learn from Noah's story to take care of each other, to take care of the things around us, and to know that when we make mistakes, we can be forgiven and we can try again, and that we can find a better way to do things, just like God did. After Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives landed on Mount Ararat, then they came out of the boat and God made the promise with them. They began to create another new society, and they did their best to make better choices. Fortunately, after a while, though, People continue to make bad choices, but God never sent another flood, even though we continue to make bad choices. God kept God's promise, so we have to keep ours. We have to try and love each other. We have to try and be good to each other. We have to try and live the way that God taught us to live, and do this every day as much as we're able, and try and make good choices. Well, thanks for listening. Can I tell you whether or not Noah's Ark story is true or real? I don't know if it's real, but I can tell you that it's true. That sometimes God made mistakes and learned from them. We make mistakes and we learn from them. And that every day we just try and do the best we can and do the right thing. That's what we're asked to do. And that is true. See you next week. Bye.